He sat on a bench, cold, soaked, invisible to the world, holding a sign that simply said, "Just want to get home." Thousands walked by. No one stopped until she did. What happened next changed both their lives forever. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes someone's miracle. The city pulsed with life. Cars honked in frustration. Engines growled impatiently as the rain drizzled steadily from a pale gray sky. Sidewalks mirrored the city lights like melted silver, each puddle rippling under hurried footsteps. People moved with purpose, briefcases in hand, collars turned up against the wind, eyes fixed forward as though nothing existed beyond their destination. The world was loud, fast, and focused on everything but the man who sat still in its middle. His name was Carl. He sat hunched on a splintered bench outside a coffee shop window, the glow from inside making a soft halo behind his silhouette. But no one inside looked out. No one saw him. His clothes were heavy with rain, clinging to his aging frame. His hands, shaking slightly, held on to a small cup of coffee like it was a lifeline. The warmth had long gone from the drink, but he held it anyway, a symbol, a little act of survival. On his lap, a piece of torn cardboard rested, sagging with damp corners. Scribbled across it in thick, uneven marker were the words, "Need help. Just want to get home." Not a plea for food or money, not even a protest against life's unfairness. Just a quiet request, written by a man who had once had somewhere to go, and someone to go to. Carl hadn't always been here. Once, he'd been a father, a mechanic, a man people waved to when he walked down the street. He'd been the guy who fixed your alternator for half price and made sure your kids' bike tires were aired up. But then his wife passed. Then came the hospital bills, the lost job, the sale of their home. His daughter had moved across the country for law school, and Carl didn't want to worry her. He thought he could handle it. He couldn't. He'd come to the city chasing a job offer that turned out to be a scam. His wallet had been stolen the second day. A stranger promised help, then disappeared with what little money he had left. For days now, he'd wandered, trying to hold on to his pride, to stay out of shelters, to find someone who might just ask, "Are you okay?" But no one had. Now he sat there in the rain, not begging, not demanding, just hoping someone might stop. Someone might look beyond the soaked coat, beyond the trembling hands, beyond the age in his face, and see a man, a soul try to get back to something he lost. Not charity, just a chance. Behind him, the city moved like a river, cold, constant, unbothered. And Carl sat on that bench like a rock in the stream, weathered, worn, but not yet washed away. And above the noise, above the storm, his sign whispered into the wind, "Need help. Just want to get home." And he waited, because sometimes, even in a world that forgets, someone remembers. Mia moved through the rain like everyone else, fast, focused, and on autopilot. Her boots tapped out a familiar rhythm on the wet pavement, weaving between puddles and pedestrians. Her umbrella shielded her from the rain, and her headphones shielded her from the world. A podcast played in her ears, something about productivity or personal growth, though she barely heard it. Her mind was already racing through her to-do list. Emails, presentations, the meeting she was already late for. She was a city girl, sharp, driven, wrapped in a kind of invisible armor that life in the concrete jungle demanded. In the city, you learn to walk past things. The noise, the pain, the people slouched in corners holding signs. You tell yourself it's someone else's problem, or worse, you stop noticing it all. But that day, something made her stop. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way the rain seemed a little colder than usual. Or maybe it was a quiet figure sitting alone on the bench, unmoving while the rest of the world swirled around him. At first, he was just another shadow in the blurred gray, an elderly man, hood pulled tight, sitting beneath the faint glow of a cafe window. But then she saw the sign. "Need help. Just want to get home." And then she saw him. His face wasn't begging. It wasn't desperate. It was just tired, worn from weather, from time, from being ignored. His eyes didn't look at her. They looked through her, as if he'd given up on being noticed. as if he didn't expect anything anymore. She slowed, just a little, one step, then another, her umbrella tilted forward, the rain still falling hard around her. She felt her fingers tighten around the two coffees she held, the one she bought for herself and the one she didn't really need. She turned. Mia stepped off the steady stream of foot traffic and stood in front of the man. Carl. She didn't know his name yet, but she felt it somehow, like the moment had weight. He didn't look up. She bent slightly and extended the cup. "I got an extra," she said, her voice softer than she expected. "It's yours now." Carl lifted his gaze slowly, blinking as though it took effort. He looked at the cup, then at her. There was a flicker in his eyes, not just surprise, but recognition, not of her, but of the fact that she was there, present, not walking past. He reached for the cup with trembling hands and gave a quiet, almost inaudible thank you. But in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about being seen, really seen, for the first time in what might have been days, weeks, or longer. In the middle of a city that moved too fast to care, one stranger had stopped. Not because she had to, because something in her heart said, "This matters." And for Carl, it was enough to begin believing again. They sat in the rain shadow of a bus stop, just outside the rush of the city, where the streetlights shimmered off puddles and strangers still hurried by, unaware that something real was happening just a few feet away. Mia shared her umbrella between them. The fabric stretched tightly as droplets tapped against it in a soft, steady rhythm. The air smelled of wet concrete, old traffic, and something unspoken between them, like sorrow that had waited too long for a listener. Carl held the coffee gently, warming his hands more than his throat. His voice was quiet at first, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether he should trust her with the truth. But there was something in Mia's eyes, calm, kind, unafraid, that gave him permission. "I came up here for a job," he began, eyes fixed on a puddle dancing beneath a broken gutter. "Was supposed to be steady work at a garage. My cousin told me it was a sure thing. Got off the bus thinking things were finally turning around." Mia nodded, listening, not speaking, just being there. He went on. "First night here, I stopped at a diner, got up to use the restroom, and when I came back, my wallet was gone. Everything, cash, ID, bus ticket, gone. No one saw anything. No one said a word." His fingers clenched slightly around the cup. "I still had hope, though. Thought maybe I could still get the job. I went to the garage the next morning. Turned out the cousin didn't know. They shut it down 2 months ago." He let out a dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been trying ever since. Tried asking for work, cleaning, lifting, anything. Most people didn't even stop to say no. I got used to hearing the silence." Mia's throat tightened. This wasn't a man asking for pity. He was just telling the truth. Something raw and quiet, delivered with the dignity of someone who had nothing left but his story. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph, creased and faded from being held too often. A girl in graduation robes stood beaming beside him. "My daughter, Jasmine. She's finishing law school in Atlanta," he said, pride flickering in his voice. "I didn't tell her I was coming up here. Didn't want her to worry. But now she probably thinks I just disappeared." There was a long pause. "I don't want money," he said finally, voice hoarse. "I just need a way back to my little girl." The words settled between them, heavy as the rain. Mia didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Her heart had already made the decision before her lips moved. "Then let's get you home." Carl turned to her, stunned by the certainty in her voice. No doubt, no conditions. Just kindness, clear as the break in the clouds above them. In a world full of locked doors, she had just opened one. Later that evening, the city had begun to quiet. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and the streets glowed softly under the golden hum of streetlights. In the gentle chaos of the bus terminal, voices echoing, wheels rolling, and loudspeaker announcements blending into background noise, Mia stood beside Carl near Gate 7, her umbrella folded at her side, her arms crossed but relaxed. She had done everything she could think of. A one-way ticket to Atlanta sat safely in Carl's coat pocket. In a small reusable tote bag she'd packed 2 sandwiches, a bottle of water, some snacks, and a pair of thick socks she'd picked up from a convenience store. Little things. Quiet things. But things that mattered. Carl stood beside her, freshly changed into the clean shirt and jacket she convinced him to let her buy. He looked less like a man lost in the city and more like a father on his way home. They hadn't talked much on the way to the station. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because the silence felt full now, not empty, like the space between them had become something safe, something understood. The announcement came over the speakers. Bus 1425 to Atlanta, now boarding. People began moving toward the line. Carl hesitated. He turned to Mia, shifting the bag on his shoulder, his hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from something deeper. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time that day, his eyes were not distant or clouded. They were alive, brimming with emotion. "I still don't know why you stopped," he said quietly. "You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." Mia smiled softly. "Sometimes we stop because we know what it's like to be overlooked, and because we hope someone would do the same for us if we ever needed it." Carl's lip quivered, and his voice cracked. "You didn't just help me," he whispered, his gaze dropping for a second before rising again. "You reminded me I still mattered." Those words landed with a weight Mia wasn't expecting, not because they burdened her, but because they changed her. They reached into part of her heart she so often kept busy and distracted, and reminded her why it mattered to notice someone, to care. They hugged. No one around them clapped. No one stopped to film or ask questions. The world kept moving as if nothing had happened. But for Carl and Mia, something had. A soul had been seen. And another had remembered how much power lived in a simple act of compassion. As Carl boarded the bus and turned for one last wave, Mia waved back, her eyes misty, but this time not from rain. And as the bus pulled away into the soft night, she stood there, heart full, knowing she hadn't just given someone a ride home. She had given him something even more precious. His humanity returned. A week later, Mia's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost let it ring out, but something nudged her to answer. The voice on the other end was warm, composed, and emotional all at once. It was Carl's daughter, Jasmine, a corporate attorney based in Atlanta. She explained that her father had made it home safely and was now resting, slowly recovering from the ordeal he hadn't wanted anyone to know about. She'd been searching for him for weeks, checking shelters, hospitals, even missing persons forums. She'd feared the worst. But Carl, proud and quiet as ever, hadn't reached out until he was already on the way home, thanks to a stranger's kindness. Jasmine was overwhelmed. She wanted to meet me in person, to thank her not as a headline, but as a human being. They met for dinner, no media, no social posts, just two women connected by a single act of compassion. That night, Mia realized something profound. Kindness doesn't need a spotlight. It only needs a heart. One small gesture, an extra coffee, a moment of empathy, had changed Carl's life, and in a quiet, unforgettable way. It had changed